Good morning. The tourism industry in the United States was already girding itself for a rocky year in 2025. But as the year has gone on, the numbers rolling in were worse than anyone thought, and getting even more so with each new month. We already knew that China would be a problem. Stories like these were everywhere in the news here in Asia. For example, study abroad trips to the United States collapsed almost completely. New visa rules went into effect, and Chinese kids who wanted to study in the US for the summer needed to visit the US consulate for a formal interview. That is the procedure anyway for students going to study at a university, but this was applied to even younger kids just heading over for summer camps. The rejection rates were pretty high, and so word spread quickly that families should consider other countries instead. The American summer camp programs were a major industry for agencies here and for schools in the United States, but those numbers are down 80% from a few years ago. So big declines from China were baked in, and China is a massive outbound tourism market. So just to tread water, the US tourism industry needs to make up ground with increases everywhere else. But that didn't happen either. In the beginning, things kind of looked okay. This is a survey from the New York Times from 30 April, and they concluded that at that time, travel to the US was holding steady. International arrivals are similar to last year's. After trying to make sense of these data and why they didn't seem to agree with reports from towns that are near the Canada border, for example, I figured out that some of the industry surveys count travelers from Canada to be international, and other surveys don't, especially if the Canadians are driving cars over. That was the problem with that chart there, because when Canadians are considered, it was already a disaster. Through April, Canadian visitors by car were off more than 40% year over year. These are the major land crossings between Canada and the United States. Washington State down 43%. Same over in New York. The Canadians weren't booking flights on planes either. Those were off 21% as of the end of April. Again, these data already look bad in April. Airline bookings are forward-looking. They're for flights later. And there are big declines here from the biggest markets. Some of the other sources of tourists were holding steady, and some others were up. Brazil was up 4%, for example, through April, but there are big concerns about Brazil now. Japan too. So if the tourism industry had any chance of a good year, they need to make up for the losses in China and get the Canadians to soften their mood in time for summer, and then hope that nothing else breaks. Then the numbers came in for the full quarter, and we see the trends steepening, getting worse out of all the major European markets. And so by May, industry analysts knew there were big problems. On 14 May, the World Travel and Tourism Council estimated losses of $12.5 billion for the US market compared to 2024. That's a 22% decline, and the United States is the only economy that would see a decrease for the year. Tourism is growing across the world for every country except the United States. Inbound from UK down 15, Germany off 28, South Korea 15%. By July, the numbers became even worse, and the estimated losses would be $29 billion. Canada is the biggest reason. Canadians stopped driving over and stopped flying in. It was the 5th month in a row of steepening declines. Canadians still love to travel, but to everywhere else. This is all being felt on the ground in the areas that are most dependent on tourism. Las Vegas is seeing their bookings collapse, driven by that big drop from Canada. Steepening is the word here too, down 14.9% in June, getting worse every month, along with occupancy and revenues per room. These are some of the metro areas most dependent on tourism: Orlando, New York, Miami, Seattle, LA. This part right here is good. If visitor counts from Canada drop 10%, that translates to 2 million fewer trips, either by car or plane, $2.1 billion in lower spending, and 14,000 job losses. But Canada is off over 40%, so multiply all those by more than 4. And that's just Canada. City by city, New York visits will drop 2.5 million for the year and a loss of $4 billion in spend. Las Vegas, we just did. California off 9%. Orlando draws over 6 million tourists a year from abroad, and Canada is the source of most of those. Miami. The primary source for tourism to Miami is South America, especially Brazil. 28 million visitors spending $22 billion. And if travelers from Brazil had the same visceral reaction to the new tariffs hitting them as travelers from Canada, that's bad news for Miami. So as inbound travelers are going elsewhere, airlines are rerouting flights to meet the changing demand. Some analysts thought the drop in inbound travelers would be just a quarter or two, but nobody thinks that anymore. Air Canada shut down major routes to Florida, Texas, and California. An Icelandic airline with service between Europe and the US announced they would stop all service effective next month. This is Shenzhen. Be good.
Everyone who asks receives. He who seeks finds. And to him who knocks it will be open. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father but by me. Everyone who hears these words of Jesus and acts on them is like a wise man who built his house on a rock. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew, and yet the house did not fall, for it was founded on a rock. Our Father,